I'm I'm studying the Steve Jobs dilemma, where he was uh, taken. He served and created the system which and the attitude which was able to build a wonderful series of products that challenged the status quo and set him up. And the concept within what his organization was, within himself, was this idea of being actually a driving force for excellence or for surprise and for finding new things and pushing towards articulation of success or articulation of quality. And he was thrown out at a certain point because of the time that it took to put together the Macintosh. I have a similar situation here where it was brought up to my attention. I mean, it was promoted that we should spend some time on a sundial, and so I've put together months actually and constructions of sundials, working with John and with James, but and the idea was to sundial would be a good thing to do for Tim Brennan. However, I never heard back anything on the subject. I think it was an interesting idea, and I still like the idea because I've been working on it for months, for years actually, and have elements of it as serious contributors, sculptures, and sketches and building on it. But we didn't. But it hasn't come to fruition yet. I want to reflect on the notion that timing and creation for excellence are seen in other areas where the idea of making something wonderful that comes out fresh and intact as an idea takes time. As an example, John encouraged me to make heads of people in St. Leonard's, and we made some wonderful clay heads which dried out, and we took them to the foundry. The foundry said that they couldn't really deal with them. It looked like they would break them if they did, and they suggested that we go to a mold maker, and a lady named Luann, and we brought them to, and this is now, it took us 3-4 months to get to the point where, number one, we took them out to the foundry, Russell Hudson, I think the guy's name is, and in Tunbridge Wells, and then we took the time while he studied them, came out there again. He said he wasn't interested in, his brother observed them and saw them as a danger for him, that he might break them or diminish them through the process. And so he suggested that we take them to a professional mold maker. And John did that. He took him to this lady, Lou Ann. And when I was there the last time, I think it was in September, we went out and visited Lou Ann, and she had the piece, but she hadn't done anything with it. Now this is time. We're now 4, 5, 6 months, maybe even close to a year from when we started it. But this is what it takes. And then, and then I encouraged John in conversation, and he stayed in contact with Luann. And last week she sent us pictures of the molding process. I don't think it was finished. It was more or less taken in order to show the process that they're going through, which includes an application of the rubber in layers, I think, and then finally the case of resin with fiberglass. And it looked good to me. It looked very good. And she apparently sent him a note saying how much she was impressed by the idiosyncrasy of the modeling in clay, and was pleased to be working on it. So all that was interesting. What I'm really breaking it down to is that a similar process was going on with the Macintosh, with Steve Jobs and his redesign of the system, and the pressing in on making it better and better and better to come up with something which is great. And the board, which was theoretically behind him, started to get antsy, and I guess obviously they can blame the shareholders, but that pressure forced him out, and he went on to work on the next computers and other things, I think Pixel and stuff, and then he was called back. And I think it's interesting that he was called back, and I haven't finished this story except that I know that he then turns to the guys and he says, listen, you guys who are the inventors and makers of things within this Apple structure, interior hierarchy, or even individual creators, you guys go out and figure out where the great ideas are. Come up with some great ideas. Freewheel it. Let's brainstorm it. Let's make it great. Now, I'm going to suggest that movie be watched once again, but the time that it takes to get something from idea to fruition is real. I've always talked about the thing about a sculpture project is that it always takes time, and when you've actually completed it, you don't remember how long it took. It's a process that's natural, steady, usable. And I'd like to go through and show how this project goes about. And I'd like to also just add into it the structure that Peter Leventhal's father and mother got into with the piece, which was actually refinished and put together, assembled by a gentleman over in Newburgh under the tutelage of, or the supervision of Rajesh Nair, and it came back to the foundry, where they identified it as a piece that they would like, and they made a commitment, and they put down, and the way I negotiated it. And they weren't interested. They were not interested. They wanted to go down in Naples, Florida. They were not interested that it should happen immediately. Like it was probably going to be 6 months before they were back down there. So the deal that we drove was 5 different stages, and this is important in making something like a piece of sculpture, or building a building, or um, taking over a property down in Washington, D.C., where um, you break it into parts, and you fund it over time, and you also do the creative process over time. For instance, the finishing of it, the mounting of it, the building of a base for installation, the preparing it for that. The term which I'm promoting is the idea that time is our friend, not our enemy, and that it's okay that these things take time. So, and the sensitivity to time, let it be and let it grow. There's a sense of urgency, of course, when you're creating something, and that urgency and the high standards, for instance, that Steve Jobs, in order to come up with the sequence of products which he came up with in his lifetime, and which we're using even now as I'm using the iPhone. These were products of his setting a standard, both aesthetically, qualitatively. Not obviously, everything has to be counted, which is the quantitative, and it's got to be a marriage of these things, and not giving way to what we call the 10-cent Coke, saving money by buying a 10-cent Coke. That used to be the term. Obviously, the monies have changed since that idea first came around, but that's the idea. And how do you suffer through that problem of, they call it cost accounting. Goldratt called it cost accounting, where you pick it apart and you sniggle. I use the word sniggling, to cut corners or to not be inclusive in solving the problem. And for me, a piece of sculpture is an entity, a complete entity. And it takes time and it takes concentration. So does a building. And to set the high standard, naturally, building on consensus is going to go for a middle ground. Okay, look, maybe most of the world survives by that. And you can, one of the arguments that they set about the English versus the American tank builders in the Second World War was that the Merlin engine from Rolls-Royce, and when it was brought to the U.S., they structured it differently. They designed it to not have to be tuned, but to be excellent on average, and excellent all the time, something like that. Anyway, that's another subject, another analysis that's I'm walking through, trying to figure out what it is to make something and get it to be made really well, but also not being apologetic for well, perfection is the enemy of the good. But you got to have the idea of good and set high standards for good. Perfection can block you, and also adaptability. All these terms are part of the creative process, which is what I'm involved in and been working on for years. But as we reach out, try to get people to understand it. You know, we go back to that lone guy at the festival who goes out on the field on a hill and starts to dance. And at first nobody's in there, he's dancing by himself. But after a while, one person joins him and starts to dance with him. Then after a while, others start to join him. And before long, you have the whole mountain with people, or hill, people dancing. And that spontaneous growth of something where as you join together in quality or in substance of some sort, that you might, it can go bad, it can go good. So it's not as if but it is a phenomenon. Now, how do I summarize that? I want to go back to the issue. I've got several issues that I'm mentioning. First of all, is the the notion that you can set high philosophical standards and conceptual standards for the project in Washington, D.C., and that it can be developed as a whole picture, which includes the building, but also conceptually its presence. What's his presence? What's his identity in the city? And that it had one with the Roger Smith named and had a stake up on the rooftop, and a steak restaurant, and which was famous. People came to it and enjoyed it, and it was powerful in the city, I think. You talk about the Willard and the Hay Adams. They were built at the same time, more or less. He didn't have the organization, I guess, or when it was when he'd grown old and his organizations had grown old, he converted it to a ground lease and had a commercial developer agree to the contract, build, and then sell it over time, and arrive at a point where working with Tishman and Speyer, who bought it, and then their decision to challenge the rate that we were charging, and took us to arbitration, I think it was. But we did for close to 50 years a comfortable relationship, we thought, although discussable, but I thought in fairness and thoughtfulness, and they paid on time until finally, some months ago, they finally couldn't see the economics of it in the post-COVID commercial real estate, and the presence of the ground lease apparently broke the back of the economics on the subject and couldn't justify their next step. Or they changed within themselves in terms of the types of economic thinking they were doing. And I think if you could get inside the inner workings of, for instance, Tishman Speyer, you would find that there was evolutions in people's thinking or individuals. For instance, I go back to this concept of, do you remember that the wonderful guy with Glengate, Joe, his name was, anyway, Joe, and he created this thing with sensitivity, with wonderful sensitivity about how to put things together. And he participated with us in the building of the and built the swimming pool there, blasting it and sending Jeff what was his name? Jeff Winthrop. What was his name? And we did it. They built a beautiful, and with Sutu checking on the aesthetics, always cross-checking on the aesthetics. See, because her contribution, the resistance to not just be, why because you can put stones around it because you can. No, she chose it and made it beautiful. And it was a great bit of work, beautiful work on Sutu's part with collaborating. And it was, and built over time. Another creation problem with that project and how it came about. That was beautiful. And the way she did that, and it served us, yea, though these many years, in that wonderful product. And actually, Joe Scott was his name. And Joe, his children took over. He went down to Florida, and they're maintaining the property. But it's interesting. They're doing a good job in terms of. My guess is that we're paying well for it, but the standard and the quality of their work and the people that they send, that's, you've got to say that's good. And the company continues to thrive. So ours, I'm looking at our company, Company Woodwind, which was the holder of the Roger Smith affairs historically, and had contracts with the various Roger Smiths. And that evolved over time as well. So we have to talk about time is your friend, and we have to talk about the fact that things do build over time, and that things do change. And there's, I think there's could I call it a beauty in there? That's interesting, I think. And through each one of these projects, including the trefoil, if you can call it that, the intertwining piece that was done for the people down on, originally the guy down on, in Darien, what was his name? His name was Andy Maszynski, and with the encouragement and support of Susie Binch, putting that thing together, and the process of building it 6 feet, a band which was probably a 30-foot or even longer band, which has been noted in YouTube and from the drawings, and ultimately used the same program or principle, or can I say a symbol, in the Interfaith Center of New York with Jim Morton and ultimately Chloe Breyer, and giving these awards each year. I thought that using a very fundamental symbol, a symbol which is super Christian or ancient, pre-Christian, and perhaps post whatever Christianity is or becoming, being changing and adaptable and as Paul Moore said, something like the versatility or the ever-changing or the flexibleness of the Episcopal Church, which is ultimately embracing the many, I suppose, seeking it anyway, and probably evolving. I don't think it is one thing or another. It embraces all the whole human thing. Anyway, that's a wandering cross concept, but also the symbol, which the intertwining trefoil, they call it a trictera or something like that, triquetra image, which is found back in the Celtic times, pre-Celtic times, and shows up in the Cornwallian crosses that not only were used as what appeared to be not only used for funereal reasons, but also for markings, for maybe it was a way of putting up a road sign. I mean, I can't speak to that, except that when you see them marking off spots, you think maybe they were used as markers, not just with a symbol, rather than stop here like we do, big red sign of a certain shape, and our caution signs are of a certain shape. This is one which is the intertwining nature of things, and presented as part of a cultural statement. Well, I'm interested in that, and I'm interested in that symbolism and the evolution of that symbolism. Anyway, I think we've done it. This is almost 30 minutes, and I'm going to send this on to John, or I'll put it up to YouTube and then see if I can allow him to fuss with it. Okay? Talk later.